So today we're out scouting a new location. We're on a skinny creek here that feeds in from the main river, and we are going to be wade fishing it with just our BFS rod and a couple of lures in an attempt to figure out if this is a viable water body to bring the kayaks up. There's a lot of, there we go. Whoa, that was almost a disaster. So there's a section of creek I've always wanted to kayak, but I don't know how realistic that is. So we are going to do something a little bit different this go around. We are going to go fish it from the furthest up access I know about from the bank, and we're gonna throw the BFS rod and just see if we can find signs of life. I'm probably just gonna start with some smaller stuff, maybe even that, just to see if we can find any life in there, to see if it's even worth our time of going up it. So that's the plan today. Some creek wading, just to see, kind of like a little scouting mission. This is kind of what goes into figuring out if a new river is viable or not. So I actually think I'm debating between starting with this and perhaps even this, or maybe even this little like Hellgrammite looking thing. I think that might be more realistic. I do like moving baits just because it's a little bit easier, but I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence. I think I'm gonna put on this because I'm really looking to find bass. So if I can find small bass, and then I can kind of work my way up from there. So we'll start with this and go from there. Well, it's officially summer. It is hot. We're about to walk down to the creek and maybe do some fishing here. There's bass in here, but it comes and goes. Like some years there's none, some years there is. Today's mission is a scouting mission on foot because I don't want to go the whole 3 miles up here from the main river into this creek and find out that there's nothing up here. So we're gonna kind of just wade fish around the road here. I've got my BFS rod. I've got my other rods with me, but we're mainly gonna focus on just taking one rod with us and a camera. Hopefully we don't run out of batteries or overheat because it is hot. So let's walk down there, see it. It might be a complete bust. You never know. That's kind of like, that's kind of the thing that it gets overlooked a lot with, creek and river fishing in general, is like, there's a lot of failures. Like, you are going to fail just as much as you're going to succeed. So we're gonna take a walk down there, see what we can find. All right, it's looking like there is some water in it. I'm just trying to avoid the poison ivy. So this water actually looks pretty clean down through here. This is gonna be fun. There's a little bit of current. My main concern here is the mud. Guess we're gonna find out the hard way. Oh yeah, this is a very soft bottom. This is about what I expected, to be quite honest. The goal is going to be to find the deeper. You can see that we've had high rains. So this is definitely the shallowest portion of this creek. And this is why we came here to begin with, because you come to where it's super shallow, because it would have felt real bad to come all the way up here and gotten stuck. It's a nice little deep hole here. One of the biggest things that you'll learn with creek fishing and just river fishing in general is it does pay to scout these areas on foot, just because putting a kayak in can be a little sketchy at times if you haven't had eyes on it. So that's what we're doing today. We're gonna wade fish probably about a mile and a half, and we'll turn around, but hopefully we can find some bass and just see if whether or not this is even worth our time. Could definitely put the kayaks in here. It's deep enough that you could float down it, but getting a backlash here. I almost wonder if I need to put on that little Rebel crank. Spinnerbaits are one of my favorite creek lures in general. You can see somebody's been back in here, so it's not like this place doesn't get pressure. I actually think the way to go will be up here. It's a nice looking hole right here. Oh, that was a gar right there. You can see him. It's a good sign. I think that's a gar. I would imagine with the way he grabbed it. See, the thing about gar is a lot of people see gar and they think it's bad, but it's actually a sign that there's enough bait fish in here to support bass and panfish populations. Obviously, panfish can be a little bit more. There's a lot of gar in this hole. Panfish obviously a little bit more advantageous, but bass can eat everything a panfish can eat. Ooh, that was a panfish. All right, all right. There's a lot. There we go. There we go. I believe that is our first fish. It appears to be a little white bass. All right, well, I don't want to sit this in. So there we go. A little white bass here on the little Pond Magic spinnerbait. Gotta be careful with these guys because they are bony. All right, so first big hole here with current, little white bass on the Booyah Pond Magic. So we dropped them, but yeah, it is a good sign of life in this creek. All right, we're gonna get this dude back in, but it's a good sign. All right, well, that would explain what we were seeing over there to a certain extent. There's those white bass, and white bass will eat just about anything a little largemouth will eat. So this could be the money hole. Gotta be careful here. This looks soft. Try to stay in the sand where I know it won't be. Somebody came through here. Oh man, if there wasn't something there. I know that looks shallow, but it could totally have a bass on it. Yeah, you can see those minnows are sitting right on it. This is actually the kind of holes I look for that will hold bass, because there's current, but it's still deep enough that they could sit in it and ambush prey, like this little hole right here. And they could be tucked all the way up in there and you would never know. I think at this point, if there was something in this hole, we would have gotten it. So we're gonna move on. Someone's car part. And what's crazy is about a week ago, this was so high that you couldn't even fish it. It was like up to the edges. And so I've been putting this off for a while this year, because it's very cyclical on how well this creek performs. Some years it's really good, some years it completely sucks. Ooh. I don't want to get too close. I could see some being in this edge. We're getting to our first like bigger hole. Oh yeah, there's some turtles. Just bouncing that spinnerbait real slow down through there. This is a really good spot for a big largemouth to be. I'm actually shocked we haven't picked something off this cliff face. There's got to be some largemouth in here. There we go. I think that is another white bass though. So he hit that a couple times. So these little white bass are running up in here, probably following the bait from the main river. Whoa, That was almost a disaster. So we're getting into a muddy stretch that's not very deep, but it does look like maybe it'll get better. But this is like justifying why I came here. And you can see other people have been fishing here, which is honestly a little surprising, but kind of justifies why I came here, because you would not have been able to come up river, or up creek rather, in a kayak from here. So there's a lot more current up here, but this is all real shallow and dirty. This is definitely not what I'm wanting to see. We'll probably go around the next 2 bends and then turn around with that little crankbait on. Definitely not blown away by this place, but I think there is potential for a largemouth the further down you get. It's just, I think a lot of the bass probably moved out of here when the water came up, because they come up here in the spring during high water from the main river. They spawn. I mean, I'm sure you get some resident fish in here, but... So we're about to make our way back down the creek. We've been throwing this little pond magic because the snags were, well, unpredictable. And I like spinnerbaits because they come through cover really easy, and just about anything that swims will eat a spinnerbait, as we've seen with the white bass. But we kind of got to a dead end, but it did get a little bit deeper through here. So at this point, my confidence in this being a viable creek this time of year is quite low. However, there's one last thing we got to do before we roll it out. So we are going to put on the small Rebel. We just took off the crankbait. This will catch anything that swims as well, but it's got a much higher hookup ratio. We're going to throw this on the way back down. Probably catch a lot of white bass, but I want to see if there's any largemouth in here. So we're coming back over here where I had a ton of strikes from, I'm not really sure what they were. So because we put on this little Rebel crank, a good chance we catch them. We're just going to cross here. I just need to be careful because we are around a lot of gar. When you start throwing, oh, like I said, when you start throwing treble hooks around gar, that's when you start to accidentally get them all tangled up. All right, we're making our way up to the last hole where we started. Got the Rebel tied on this time. I'm gonna see if I can pick off some panfish. If I catch some panfish, I would feel a lot better about this hole. Because you can catch white bass in just about every creek in Illinois off a main river. There we go. I would just imagine that's another white bass by the way I hit it. So there we go. Our 5th white bass. All right, well, we're making our way back up to the bridge where we started. We're gonna go and do one last thing before we take off, which I alluded to in this video, could be the most important aspect of this whole journey, and making sure that we did not harshly judge this creek. All right, back in the truck, I walked our way out. We're heading to where you would come in at the mouth. That's what we're gonna check out next. I just wanna see the water clarity down there, see what it looks like. Gut instinct on this creek, it's a no. You know, there's a lot of healthy white bass in there. They were pretty small though. They've probably been trapped up in here from when they ran up here. Tons of gar, not a lot of panfish. And if I had seen some panfish, I would have felt a lot better about this creek. Obviously we didn't catch any bass either. I have caught bass here, but like I said, it's very cyclical throughout the year. Sometimes they're in here, sometimes they're not. I've actually caught some pretty decent ones right by where we launched. It just depends on water levels, but it is pretty silted in, and that has a lot to do with the farming runoff the last few years. So especially with all the rain we're having, it washes into the farm fields. I could tell that the water too had a lot of like impurities and like fertilizers in it. That's why you see like that red and like some of the other bacteria growing on the surface. So we're gonna head down to the launch and we'll get back to the house, and I'm gonna talk through some of the strategies I use to find fishable water that I've never been to. So here we are at the final part of this whole process. We're not all the way down, but we're down far enough. I didn't want to go down into the noisy marina, but we can see that the water down here is much more stagnant than what we were fishing down there, where it was nice and clear. You can see there's the bridge. So we can check this one off our list as being viable. I think there's probably some decent sized bass in here at times, but for the most part, it's going to be a tough summer creek. So a lot of people would consider that trip unsuccessful, but for me, that trip right there was actually a great success because it gave me the intel to know that that creek we were looking at probably isn't something that we want to take a full day and go up. I was only out there maybe like an hour and a half total. I walked about a mile up that creek, so about where you would get if you were coming up through the mouth. And it basically saved me. I was able to invest about 2 hours of my day to save, well, let's just say worst case scenario, of a half day of fishing, trying to figure out if this creek had any fish in it or not. Now, don't get me wrong, there was definitely a largemouth in there if you're willing to work on it, but the clearer stuff just wasn't producing up creek. So the foot mission was actually quite successful because it saved me the effort. Now, if the water comes up a little bit, it might be worth going back, checking it out, see if anything changes from there. But on the surface level, that creek for me was a bust, but that trip was a success because we did catch some fish. You know, I like catching white bass, but it did show me that, hey, you probably don't want to invest time into that. So I'm gonna give you guys a couple strategies I use when it comes to scouting a new river and especially creek. So let's use Dale Hollow for example. If you go back and watch my Dale Hollow videos, you know that I fished Dale Hollow in the main lake. Well, if you watch the video that came between practice and the actual fishing, you saw that I actually fished the river that flows into Dale Hollow. It's the main river that creates it. There's not a lot of information out there on it, so we just kind of had to wing it. But one of the things I like to do with this is to look at the creeks flowing into the main river, like what we did in this trip, to see how healthy they are. A lot of times that those creeks flowing in, if it's clear water, rocky bottoms, there's a good chance that the main river is going to be somewhat clear as well. So for that tournament, we actually found a bridge that was way upstream, launched here from a bridge and floated down to the main lake. And we were able to see whether or not it was possible to get back up that river without trying to do it from the start. So a lot of times you're better off when you're exploring your river to go further up to see what the water looks like up there instead of making the effort to go all the way upstream to get there. The same goes too with a float though. So like if you get up there and it doesn't look good, you don't really want to waste the time floating all the way down. You're floating to a lot of dead water. I've done that so many times that I've learned my lesson the hard way, that you can waste a full day of fishing, and not all of us have a ton of time to fish floating down this river that's going to be unproductive. So if you can find like an hour or two in your day to go there after work and between lunch, just to look at those higher ups, you know, one of the things I like to do is to find a bridge, pan around, move up a little bit, find the river, see what the water looks like. This is actually an area I can fish. You can see that on 8 August 2024 on Street View, that's when this was taken, the water is clear. This looks like it would probably produce. Whereas if you go to where I went and you look at the street views on some of these different creeks, you can see that the water is muddier, it's not as rocky, so it's probably not gonna be a good smallmouth habitat. But like the place we fished in the video, I was looking for largemouth. You know, it was more of that muddy Mississippi River type stuff, whereas this is more of that like clear mountain Ozarky stream type stuff. So it really just does depend too on species. Like if you're looking to target smallmouth, probably didn't want to go to where I went today, but if you're looking to target smallmouth and you see something like what I just showed you on the screen there, it probably makes a lot of sense. So in summary, although this trip may on the surface level feel like I didn't really have a very productive day, you know, we caught like 4 or 5 white bass, I had a gar on for a little bit, and I think I might have missed a catfish. I don't even know if I got that on video, but it told me like, hey, you probably don't want to take the time, take a whole day out of your schedule to go float this river because it's just not productive. Instead, I was able to go out there for about an hour and a half, wade the creek and kind of get an idea of what I was working with. So that one is going to be checked off my list as not now. So hopefully if you guys found this information helpful. I know it's a little bit different style of video, but I get a lot of questions about like fishing rivers, lakes, and creeks, how I find new water, what makes a good water. And you know, there's tons of things we go into. We could talk for an hour about what makes it good, but I think going and seeing it for yourself, far upriver, far up creek, you know, accessing the lake where you want to be. Like, you don't have, it doesn't have to be a river or creek. You could do it on a lake. You could go to where you want to kayak to and say like, hey, does this look good? Because I can't tell you how many times I've looked at a map, found a spot on the lake, said, oh, that looks good. The launch is way over here. I've got to go all the way up here to get to it. And I get there and it stinks. So if you can find those accesses that are closer to where you want to be further upriver, it can save you a ton of time. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you guys next time on the water.